Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started in a few minutes. So in the meantime, can you just put your name and your pronouns, your role, and your city or school district in the chat so we know who's here? And we'll go over the interpretation function in a little bit. But for those of you who have just joined us, please turn on the Spanish interpretation. Oh, there we go. Okay. And you can see that little globe down there. Click on interpretation, and then you can choose your language. And if you need any help, just let us know. So we'll get started in a couple minutes. Thank you.
Sorry, Nicole, what was that last piece of the questions? It was name, role, name, pronouns, role.
Oh, and city or school district?
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Maritza. Hi, Brenda. Hi, Jessica. Thank you all for joining. I see some other folks like Anna and Avelia and Martha. Welcome, everyone.
Hello, Nicole. Hello, everyone.
Once again, if you haven't already, if you could put your name, your pronoun, your role, and your city or school district in the chat, that would be awesome. Hi, Leah and Dwayne and Joanna or Johanna. I don't know. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, but welcome. And welcome Dolores and Tom. And yes, the recording will be shared with everyone after in both English and Spanish. And I think maybe we should get started. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So if anyone isn't already in the right channel, please make sure that you click on the interpretation button down there that looks like a globe and choose your language. We have English or Spanish. And I realized I didn't do it, so I just did it right now too, sorry. And next slide, please. And then also just please be aware that closed captioning is available and you can click that show captions button down there to show closed captioning if that's something that would be helpful. You can see the chat icon right here. Click on that to chat. Throughout the evening today, we'll be asking you to participate in chat or to raise your hand or come off mute. In general, if you could please remain muted during the presentation and only unmute yourself if you're sharing, that would be helpful. And if you look at the little microphone at the bottom of your screen, that's how you can mute and unmute. Also, we'll be recording this training. You probably got a notice when you joined, so just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. And if you have any trouble throughout the training today, then just put like a little message in the chat that you need some help, and one of us can definitely help you. All right, so welcome everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nicole Gon-Ochi. My pronouns are she, her. I work at Public Advocates. I'm a lawyer. I'm also a mom in LAUSD. I have 2 kids, one in middle school and one in elementary school. And just want to thank you all for coming today. I know there's a lot of things that you could be doing at 5:30 on a, Thursday evening. So thank you for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it. Next slide, please. So again, for those of you who know us, and if you've been to our webinars before, you probably know that we usually try to pack in too much information and too many activities in one session. So we're trying to take the feedback that we've received and keep it simple today. So today we only have 2 goals. Number 1, we hope that all of you can walk away today understanding how to use the California dashboard, which is a data tool designed for everyday people, not researchers, not academics, not policy wonky people, but just everyday people to use to identify equity gaps in your community. And number 2, we hope that you can understand some new tools to address inequities in your community that the legislature passed last year and are going into effect this year. Next slide, please. So here's a roadmap for our time together today. We're kind of going to do a short grounding and reflection, and then we're going to go into this data tool, the California dashboard. We're going to explain what it is and how it works, and go through a demonstration and give you all a little bit of time to play around with it yourselves so that you can see what it shows about your district. And then we're going to go into a couple of the new tools created by the legislature to close equity gaps that are going into effect this year. And then we're hoping to have plenty of time for questions and answers, because we think that's probably where folks learn the most and are most engaged. So we're hoping to leave a lot of time for that. And then we're going to end our evening. So next slide. So this is just kind of our grounding here. Like, why are we here today? Why are you here today? If you can put your answer in the chat why you're here today, that would be great. And I'll just kind of, this is maybe one answer for why we're here today. At the end of the day, all of us, whether we're advocates or organizers, parents, students, or educators, I think we're all here because we want to see schools where all our kids can succeed. And what does it mean to succeed? I mean, I think it means a lot of things, right? But to explore the stories of their communities and build the skills that bring them joy and fulfillment, to reach their college and career goals, to be equipped to be thoughtful and engaged citizens, to become the people that make this world a more just place, to bring their gifts and their beauty and their contributions out into the world. Whatever you think success is for your child or for the kids that you teach, or if you're a student, for you yourself, feel free to share that with us. But we also know that even though that is our hope and our goal, that this education system was not built for all of us. We know that our schools have been places of exclusion and push out and whitewashing for Black, Indigenous, and other students of color. And although progress has been made, not enough has been done. And that's why we all need to work together to identify and address the unmet needs that continue to prevent all students from succeeding. And ultimately, that's why I'm here today. And I think probably that's why most of you are here today. And we're here just to add tools to our toolbox as we all continue this long-term work of building power to transform our schools and create the conditions for low-income BIPOC students to thrive. Next slide, please. So I just kind of like shared my little thing, but now I would love to hear from you all about the students at your school or your district who have the most unmet needs, and what could be done to address those needs. What can be done to support those students to reach their potential and thrive at school. So feel free to put your answers in the chat, or feel free to come off mute and share. And let me see what is already in the chat. So Dwayne, do you want to share with us about your efforts to get funds for English learners?
Certainly. We've been studying the LCAP for years, and we have written responses our responses have been things like, you say you're going to do X, but you don't measure that. We don't have any way to measure what you're doing. We focused on English language learners, not because they're more important than other groups, but because they are a specified group, and therefore we can look for their data in the dashboard, which we use. I'm glad the dashboard is updated now so that it has a more current English language learner uh, methodology. But we've been banging our heads on a district for 6 years, and we continue to bang. We have another meeting tomorrow with district personnel about this year's LCAP.
I'm sorry to hear that, Dwayne. Can you share what district you're from?
Sac City Unified.
From Sac City. Okay. Well, as we go further today, let's like as we're going through the demonstration and as you have time on your own to look at things, I'm hoping that some of the things today might give you a little bit more leverage, but I mean, you've been fighting for 6 years. So another thing that we're going to have at the end of this is if you want to sign up for like a one-to-one kind of like strategy session with us, you can definitely do that. Not that we really have any answers that you don't have, but if any of that would be helpful, then we're happy to chat more offline too. So thank you for sharing, Dwayne. Does anyone else want to share? I think we have time for maybe one more share. Tom, I see you put something in the chat. Do you want to share out loud?
No, not at this time.
Okay. Well, thank you for putting in the chat.
I can go,
Anyone else?
Nicole.
Oh, okay, great.
Um,
Thanks, Linda.
so let's see what I put in there verbatim, but I'm here to learn how to truly create unity within our Lolita community. And so even to right now, what our friend mentioned about, I keep turning it into like, yes, from the dashboard, how do we measure progress? Because I talk to my students and I tell them like, hey, is this, and like students that usually don't talk to adults most of the time, right? And I'll tell them like, hey, is this year better or worse? And they'll kind of just like shake their hand. Oh, sorry, I'll get on camera to show you guys real quick. I'm also trying to cook,
Oh.
but waiting for the water to boil. But the student will go like, and I'm like, okay, is it in a better way or in the worst way? And they'll go like, in a better way. So I'm like, okay, so we're making progress, but we're definitely not where we want to be, right? And that's okay, because this is life skills. Our youth are also seeing the adults pivot. The youth are seeing the adults learn and talk and try and have hard conversations. And they're also wanting to use their voice. And so we're trying to figure out how to empower them to use their voice so that they can actually get to see the change that they want. Because right now, we're getting ready for this new LCAP, right? And families haven't spoken up. Families haven't had that trust to yet like voice their opinions. And I'm like, you guys, like, how do I get this out there to our community that like without your opinion, like the things stay the same because someone else is deciding for you what they think is best. And I think right now, Linda and I have been very open, and she's been like, no, I want the families to come in. And so I'm trying my best to communicate with both tribal communities as well as the rest of our whole wide community of Lolita, right? And really see like, why do we have so many inter-district transfers? Like, what can we do better too? Like, let us know. So yeah, and last little piece on that is just like, I've been asking myself like the thoughts that I'm thinking about the school. So I would share with everyone here, this is something that I've been doing with the middle school students, and it's been amazing to capture their thoughts on their school. So I'll just like talk to them. I taught them this like self-model during a social and emotional learning session. And I just gave them a circumstance of Lolita. And I said, give me the first thought that comes to mind when you think of Lolita, like your school. And the thoughts that come out, I was like, wow. But I like encourage all of us to ask ourselves, like, what are the first thoughts that come to our mind about our school? Because if it's like, God, like this has been the worst experience, or we're so understaffed, like all of those thoughts, I can guarantee do not make you feel, because that's how I teach the kids, right? A thought makes you feel some kind of way, and I make them like choose one word feeling. So they'll be like angry, bored, upset, right? And then I'm like, and then how do you behave or how do you act when you're bored, whatever. So I would say like, you guys too, us, do that about your own school or district or whatever you have, because if those are your thoughts and feelings, like what does the community at large feel? So that gives us like
Right.
that empathy entrance into like speaking with our families, hopefully.
That's super powerful. Thank you for sharing, Brenda. And I think that's a perfect segue into like our next kind of section. If we go to the next slide. I think, you know, what you're saying is so true, so foundational, that communities know their own needs best, right? It's the students who are actually in the school that, like you're talking to, Brenda, that are really able to express what they need, like what they want to see. It's the families that need to be engaged better in this whole process and in all of the processes, right? That have the solutions, that can identify what the problems are the best. And so even though we're sharing with you a data tool tonight, the reason we're sharing it with you is not to say that it is like the most truthful thing out there. You know, it's actually your stories that are the most truthful thing. And it's the data that you can use to support your stories. And so this is just a tool again, but you don't need the data to know what you need. And so so I do want to emphasize that. And thank you for sharing, Brenda. If we go to the next slide, please. So, so again, the data tool that we're going to share today is the California dashboard. I don't know if folks are in a place where they can do this, but if you want to, you know, raise the hand thing on the Zoom, if you've ever, you know, heard of the dashboard, it'll just give us a sense of how familiar folks are with this. You could also drop it in the chat. But I see a couple people. Okay, so some of you are familiar with the dashboard, so apologies if some of this is basic, but the dashboard is basically this website that shows how specific student groups and schools in a district are doing on academic, school climate, and other state standards. And one important thing to know about the history of the dashboard is that it was an intentional shift away from measuring student performance or school performance only based on one thing, which was test scores, right? So it's designed to be this holistic measure of school and district performance, which is why it includes things like chronic absenteeism and suspension and other things, in addition to academic metrics. And the second thing to just keep in mind about the dashboard is that it is an accountability tool. And what I mean by that is that the state and the county offices of education that kind of oversee the districts, they look at this tool that we're going to talk about today, and they look at it to identify places where schools and districts need improvement and support. So it is the main tool that the state uses. But again, going back to the stories and community knowing their needs and their solutions the best, it's definitely, you know, just one tool. So if we go to the next slide, these are the different state measures that have a color on the dashboard. And as you can see, a lot of them are academic. Both the English language arts and the math one are measured using SBAC, which is a standardized state test that many schools administer in the spring, usually starting around 3rd grade. The English Learner Progress one is based on the LCAP, which is the English Language Proficiency Assessment. It's based on how many students made progress on that test from one year to another. The graduation rate is kind of self-explanatory. Chronic absenteeism is the number of students who were absent 10% or more of the school year. And suspension is those kids who are suspended, K through 12. And then college and career readiness is a little harder. It's basically any student that meets one of many criteria. And some of those criteria are like a score of 3 or higher on 2 AP exams, or meeting all A through G requirements, getting a 3 or higher on both ELA and math SBAC. So there's a number of different ways that a student can be identified as prepared for college and career. And then if we go to the next slide, which is the performance scale, this is just the way that districts and schools are ranked. And so as you can see, red scores show that the needs aren't being met, whereas blue is the highest, and it's the highest performance. And another thing to know about these colors is that It's a combination of current year results and whether results improved from the prior year. So for example, if say your English language arts scores were like low this year, but they increased from last year, you would be on yellow. But if they are low and you decreased, then you would be in orange. So that's kind of how the color scale works. I think that's pretty much it. And I think I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Alice.
Thanks, Nicole. And so now that we've kind of learned a little bit of the basics about the dashboard, one of the best ways to really understand it is to actually look at the dashboard. And actually, let's see. Oh, thank you, Sylvia, for translating that comment in the chat. So we're gonna take a look at the dashboard website, and we'll drop a link to the website in the chat so that you can follow along if you want. And so here is the link to the dashboard. Oh, thanks, Nicole. And so we're going to do a demo right now so that we can look at it together. And then afterwards, we'll also be giving people time to look at your own districts and schools. And so, you know, there'll be time for that. And so for this example, we're going to take a look at Long Beach Unified. So in order to do that, we're just going to enter the name of the district here in the find box. And then we're going to click on this magnifying glass. And then we get to the first result, which is Long Beach Unified. We're going to click on that. And then on this first page, you'll see a summary of how Long Beach is doing on some of the different statewide metrics that Nicole just went through. So this is a good kind of summary page, but we're actually going to go up here to where it says view additional reports in order to get some more detailed reports. And so we're just going to click on that. It's going to open a new window. And so there's a bunch of different reports here that we are going to be, or that you can explore. And we're going to take a look first at the student group report, but actually first, oh, what if two schools come up? You can click on them to see more information about which school it's referring to. So is there a specific example that you're thinking of that you want to work through, Brenda?
Yeah, no, so when I do the search on the dashboard, there's two results and they both say Lolita, Humboldt County. Like, so the dashboard is showing me two Lolitas. So, and one says Lolita Union. One says Lolita Union Elementary and one says Lolita Elementary. And they do have different CDS codes, but they give similar and a little bit different information. So I'm like, which one should I go based off of?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So one of the things that you can do here is you can actually go to the CDE website. And they have a school lookup tool. So this California School Directory, and I'll drop this in the chat as well. Oh, before I go on, I should say, we actually have a handout as well with more information about like how to use the dashboard. And so Carissa, I think, has dropped that in the chat. And so you can also use that to follow along if it's easier to look at a handout instead of, oh, the font size is too small, sorry. This font size on the handout or the font size on my screen?
And sorry, can I jump in about Lolita really quick? I think that the reason that Lolita has two entries is because it's a school, it's a single school district. So one entry is like the school, and then one entry is the district, but because it's a single school, you know, like it has different codes, but I'm not sure if it really has different information.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Nicole just answered why, but in the event that you do want to like figure that out, you can also put in these CDS codes into the school directory, and it'll tell you which school it's referring to in more detail. So it'll give you like the superintendent or the principal and all of that information, and then you can kind of figure out whether the one that you're looking at is the one you're looking for. Does that make sense? Great. And I think maybe the font size too small was probably referencing my screen. So let me just try to make that bigger. Is that better?
Yeah, much better, Alice.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carissa. Right, so we got to this page, which is the additional reports and data. And so I think, as I said, there's a lot of different reports here. It's easy to get overwhelmed. But first, we're going to look at the student group report, which is, I don't know how many down from the top, but it's right here, the student group report. So we're going to press submit, and that'll get us to the first report that we're going to look at. And so this report is color coded, which is helpful because then you can see kind of at a glance where different student groups are at. So as we talked about when we were talking about the scale, red is the lowest performance. And so we really need to be the most concerned when we see red. And so here you can see for Long Beach Unified, there's red or actually, I guess you can't see the top of the screen, but for English learners, there's red in graduation rates and in math. For foster youth, there's red for suspension rates and graduation rates. For homeless youth, there's red for graduation rates. For students with disabilities, there's red for graduation rates in English language arts, so on and so forth. And this is not to say that we don't need to worry when student groups are in orange, but I think red is when we really see the highest need. And so that's what we're concentrating on in this training tonight. And so this kind of already tells us where certain student groups in the district are struggling, but it also doesn't really tell us the whole story. So if we look here at English learners, we actually see their English learner progress is green here, right? Which makes it seem like English learners are doing really well. But as folks from Long Beach probably know, this doesn't necessarily line up with what people see in their schools. And so we really need to be looking at this a little bit more closely. And so the way that we would do that is that we would go up to view other reports for this district. And this is going to bring us back to this menu page. And so in order to really get a closer look into what is happening with English learner progress, we're going to click on this 5x5 English learner progress placement report. So these 5x5 reports give more detail by school in specific indicators. So we'll press submit here. And this gets us to this report. And so you'll see, English learners in some of these schools are doing really well, right? So we see blue for Bernie, Garfield, Henry, all these schools, and some in green. But then if we keep going down to the red, we actually see there are a number of schools, particularly elementary and middle schools, that are in red. And so even though some of the English learners in some schools are doing really well, there are other schools where English learners are struggling to make progress. And so we want to really look at these specific schools to see what might be happening there. And so as an example, let's try Hoover Middle School. So we click on Hoover Middle School, we get to this report. And this report is less helpful because it's just about English learners. And so the only student subgroup on this report is going to be English learners. And so instead of looking at that, we're going to go up to here. So this is, I should say, this is now, we're in the school report interface instead of what we were looking at before, which was the district level interface. And so we're going to change the report here from the 5x5 English learner report to the student group report for the school. All right, so hopefully this is large enough for folks to see. But if we look at this school level report, we can start to see some other patterns, right? So we see first that, English learners are doing not well on English learner progress, but we also start to see that English learners and students with disabilities are also struggling with, sorry, I just had a blank, that they're struggling with English language arts. And we also see some issues with chronic absenteeism, right, for homeless youth and African-American youth. And the other big thing that you might notice is there's this big school-wide problem with math, right? Most of the student groups are in red, if not in orange. And so we see that, there is a clear issue here with math. And so having this data, again, is not just data for data's sake, but we really want to be saying, okay, well, we see this, and we also know, based on our experience, that there are these big gaps in needs at Hoover Middle School. And so this data helps us say, well, the kids here are really struggling with math. And so what do we need in order to meet those needs, right? So we can say this data helps to show that we need to be hiring a math coach, or we need to get bilingual tutors, or whatever else that we really think needs to happen in order to help these students succeed. And so that is the very basic overview of the California School Dashboard. And hopefully this kind of gives you an idea about the kinds of information that you can find on the dashboard. I know that it's a little bit confusing because we just clicked on all of those things. But as I said, we have put a link to the handout in the chat that kind of walks you through how to get to this data. And really the best way to figure it out is to try it for yourself. So I think we can drop a link again in the chat to the handout, which kind of walks you through the steps to get to these reports. And then after that, we're going to give folks a few minutes to explore your own district data. And so if you have questions while you're doing that, you can, or if you have questions right now, based on the walkthrough that we just did, please raise your hand or put your question in the chat, and then we can kind of help troubleshoot. Does anybody have any questions before we give folks time to look at the dashboard on your own?
Sorry, did you get to this page from the dashboard, or is this a different link to get to like the screen that you're on right now?
Yes, that is an excellent question. And so you can get to this page from the dashboard after you click on the district or school that you're looking for. And if you go to the top of the page on the dashboard, there's these 3 buttons. And so you click on View Additional Reports. Any other questions before we get started? And you can still ask questions after we get started. Just wanted to clarify if anybody needs some help before we dive in.
Thank you.
Maybe again, Alice, while you're on the screen, can you show when you click on view additional reports, the list that shows up there? And then I believe last time we went to student group, but maybe if we can show how to get directly to that other one as well.
Sorry, which one?
The screen that we just had up, that was through student group report, right?
Yes. I think if you want to go directly to the school report, you can, well, from here, it's actually kind of complicated to get to this page from just the internet. And so I would recommend starting with the search on the dashboard. But once you get to this, if you find you want to look, instead of looking at the district, you want to look at the specific school, you can click return to search up here, and it'll get you to this school or district search. And so you can search the specific name of the school or the district that you want to look for. So if you want to look at a school report, the one we were just looking at, Hoover Middle, you could put it on Hoover Middle and search for it that way. And then you could pull up any of these reports from there as well. Any other questions? All right, so in that case, I'm going to give folks maybe 10 minutes to take a look at the dashboard. Ooh, Maria? Maria, did you have a question?
Yes. How often the district they need to updating this information?
Sorry, I couldn't hear it very clearly. Could you say that again, or does?
I think it's how often.
Yeah, sorry,
should-
I'm driving. That's why. How often the district they need to updating this information?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So this data is usually updated once a year. During the pandemic, it was not updated for a few years because of the challenges with the pandemic, but starting with this year, it should be updated every year. All right.
I have another question, sorry. And
yeah.
And who's in charge to follow up this follow up with the district?
I get so
Alice, do you want me to jump in here?
Sure.
That would Maria, we're going to be going over it a little bit in terms of how we all as like community organizers and parents and advocates can basically be holding the district accountable. The district is this is an accountability tool where the district has to report it to the state to see where these numbers are. And then after, I believe every 3 years, they have to show there's also a level for effectiveness. So they do have to start showing that, but we will be going over it in a little bit in terms of how they have to show it in the report, and then what we all can do to hold the district accountable to make sure that they're holding true to it.
Thank you for the questions.
I have a question. On the report that you were showing right now, after you click on the 5x5 reports, where do you go after that? Because I was looking at my district and it gave me, I don't know if I missed a step. It gave me different, it had different schools on the report. So I don't know if I missed a step.
Yeah, do you mind telling me which district you're looking at?
Pomona Unified
Pomona. All right. So
on there, okay. Okay, from the list. Okay, I see it.
oh no, I'm just trying to get into the
Okay, okay.
but yes, so you were saying you were looking at one of these 5x5
Yes, I was there and then I clicked submit,
Mm-hmm.
and it showed me let's see, yeah, different school size, like Pantera Elementary, Village. So would I click on one of those to see the school independent by itself, or okay?
Yeah.
Because I'm a little bit confused when when you're looking at the English learners report, it was different. So
Yeah. So I was on the same report, but I just had scrolled down to one of these red schools.
oh, okay, I see. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I think, yeah, my screen is really big right now, so that might be why it's confusing. But yes, once you click on one of these schools, then you'll get into the school report, and then you'll get the option here to change the report that you're looking at for the school.
Got it. Thank you very much.
So I'm gonna play some music for the next 3 minutes. And then if you have questions in the meantime, feel free to come off mute like other folks have, put it in the chat like some folks have, or raise your hand. Oh, go ahead, Maria.
How the parents, I don't know who is the person, but how the district can show this information to the parents, especially to the parents and represent for each school. Schools and council or district Alum Rock, they had one committee, the parents are for the LCAP. I don't know how, or the parent can ask into the district to present this information.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think districts are required to include some of this information in the LCAP, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I think it's always a good idea if you are in any of these committees, or even if you're not on a committee, if you're interested in this information, to ask the district to present it to you all, because you know, it's just part of transparency, and we want the districts, or we want all of your districts to be sharing that information with people. If you want to access the information on your own, it is, as we're showing you here, you can get it, it's public information. But definitely the data has to go back to that conversation between you and your district, or you and your school. Yes, and if you have questions and that you want to ask in Spanish, please ask in Spanish. We have a wonderful interpreter, Sylvia, who is going to help us understand and also answer your question. But I know that wasn't a lot of time. Oh, somebody just unmuted. Somebody has a question?
Yes, this is Gilberto.
Mhm.
In your example, you showed that for English learners, it was the overall trend was green, but as you dug down deeper, you saw there were some issues.
Yes.
How does the assessment arrive at being green? In other words, given what all the problems that I saw in that district, how could they be assessed as overall green? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So basically the overall is kind of like when you're looking at all of the schools and all of the students in the district. But we know, especially with larger districts, there can be a lot of disparities within a district between like different schools and different different geographical areas and things like that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but basically it's because overall, if you look at the percentage of English learners in the entire district, on the whole, they're doing relatively well. But for certain schools, that's not true. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. Thank you very much.
Jessica?
Sí, buenas tardes. Soy
Yes,
de
good evening. This is Jessica Limon from Pomona District. I am looking directly at Diamond Ranch School. I definitely agree. At what you see at district level, you see that there's advancement with our English learners. But then I went directly into Diamond Ranch School and I see that we're in red. We are in red. So how? How are we looking at this? If our district is showing us that we are growing, but versus you look at the other one, you see that we are in red. How is this based? How is the accountability? Do you take into account all the schools for the district, or are all the schools in red and the district is just saying that they're doing their job?
That is another excellent question, which we are actually about to get into, I think. The short answer is the district is going to have to be accountable for both things. So both the overall score, or like the overall performance in the entire district, but also the district at specific schools. And so this might be a good place to transition over to the next part of our presentation, if there are no other questions.
I do also just want to use this time for folks who speak English and have not gone into your interpretation settings. You can also go in there and just make sure that you're listening in English. So then when folks ask a question or provide comments in Spanish, you can also understand that too. And let us know if you're having any difficulties with accessing that interpretation services. And then with that, if we don't have any other questions. Oh, and we have from Dwayne, you can insist that the district improves English learners in specific schools, not just the district. Yes, that is an awesome addition, Dwayne. Thank you, because that's what we're going to be going over in a second. It's basically showing how these new required actions coming out of the dashboard are really going to be providing a more targeted approach for us to be looking at the data, but also for the district to be showing how they need to be supporting specific students. So just to recap what we have gone over, our communities know what needs are not being met and how to best address those needs. It's obvious in this room and even just like with the feedback that we've been hearing from you all tonight. The dashboard data is what county offices of education and the state rely on to measure student and school outcomes. So that's like how the district is reporting this data to the state. And lastly, dashboard data can be additional evidence to demonstrate our community's needs and advocate for solutions. Next slide, please. So going into, after we first identified needs, we got the data to back up those needs and then identified solutions. So now we really got to see how do we actually make those solutions a reality. And this section is going to be going over how to address inequity and unmet needs. Next slide. So with this, starting in this new year, there's going to be 3 new requirements to address inequities. There are the required actions to close equity gaps, required actions for long-term English learners, also known as LCAPs, and then the equity multiplier funding and focus goals. That is not going to be getting discussed tonight. That's going to be getting discussed in our webinar in 2 weeks. When the equity multiplier school lists are posted. So if you've been hearing this phrase going around and buzzing in your district and you want to know more about it, join us for next webinar. But for tonight, we're going to be focusing on required actions to close equity gaps and then actions for LTELs as well. Next slide, please. So before going into the required actions, we do want to just do a brief LCAP basic, just in case any folks here are not too familiar with the LCAP and what it means to have required actions in the LCAP. So really, what is the LCAP? The LCAP is a 3-year strategic plan that every district in California must create to address issues, including the indicators on the dashboard, like we were just showing in the example that Alice gave, like suspension and college preparedness. And the LCAP is a report that came out of the Local Control Funding Formula, also known as LCFF, which was California's groundbreaking equitable funding formula that passed around 10 years ago, after a really long, hard-fought campaign by students, families, educators, and advocates to change how the schools are funded in California. So under LCFF, family and student engagement, school climate, and conditions of learning matter just as much as student achievement. So now, basically, or not now, but generally, the LCAP basics include a district plan. It's a very long report that shows the district's plan for funding action items like programs, staff, and services to address student needs. And it must show goals and progress towards their goals, including how the funding is being used to close gaps in student outcomes, and then also community engagement in deciding which programs, staff, and services are prioritized. So really what is foundational to the LCAP and what came out of LCFF is collaboration and engagement with directly impacted students, families, educators, administrators, and community members. The goals, the metrics, and the actions that are provided in the LCAP report should all be shaped by community input. I think we all know in this room that this doesn't always happen in reality, but that truly is the vision of LCFF and the LCAP. And because the LCAP is a 3-year plan, it's updated annually. So right now we're going to be starting a new cycle. So all of these updates are going to be getting shown for the next 3 years. And so what we're going to be advocating around over the next few months is going to be the 2024 to 2025 LCAP and budget. That's the first year of this new LCAP cycle. And then each year, the district must work together with the community to analyze progress towards the goals and must show how they're using its funding equitably. Next slide, please. So the first of the new requirements that involve the California dashboard is the requirement to address required actions to close equity gaps. So districts now, beginning in this 2024 to 2025 LCAP, will have to address disparities shown in the dashboard and target funding to make improvements and raise the achievement of student groups performing in the red. So from 2024 to 2025, all school districts are going to be required to include in their actions any student group that received the lowest performance level, which shows up as red, on one or more state indicators, any school that received the lowest performance level on one or more state indicators, and any student group within a school that received the lowest performance level on one or more state indicator. So that's similar to like how when Alice was going through and really breaking it down from student subgroup to then the school and then the student group within the school. So you can really see how those colors change depending on the student subgroups that are getting impacted. And originally, districts were only required by law to develop improvement efforts for the district as a whole, but now they must take a more narrow and targeted approach, which is really going to like what Dwayne said in the chat. This is going to be much more targeted. Each action must address the identified state indicators for which student group or school received a red in there. And then this is also just a reminder that the red is really just the floor, it's not the ceiling. So districts will be legally obligated to address any red indicators and any issues that are showing up for subgroups in the red. But we're really hoping that, you know, in addition to trying to address the issues that are in the red, that they're going to be taking actions that will also improve the performance for students and schools that are in the orange or the yellow. So then overall, we're starting to see an increase in color, or I guess, the switch from red to eventually green. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're gonna go through, we have 3 examples, all of them are from Oakland. And these are gonna be the examples of, again, that breakdown. So first, the student group in red on a state indicator. So what this chart shows, I do actually just wanna ask, is this looking okay? I don't know if we can't zoom in on the slides, can we? No, I'm hoping you all can see this. If you need me to be reading out like what is on here a little bit more clearly, just unmic yourself or write it in the chat, and I'll try to be a little bit more clear. But what this chart is showing is it's a screenshot from the California dashboard. And this is showing the student group in red in Oakland Unified. And so what we have with the arrow focusing on African-American students is every single indicator from chronic absenteeism to math is in the red. So because of this, Oakland must create targeted actions for Black students to address all of these indicators: chronic absenteeism, suspension, graduation rate, English, and math proficiency. So I really want to just leave this moment when you're looking at this, especially I feel like it's really stark when you see all the colors and the contrast there. What does this bring up for you? If we have any folks from Oakland Unified, would love to hear from you. If there are other folks in the room who are seeing similar colors and numbers in your district, you can feel free to unmic or write in the chat, anything that might be coming up while looking at this. I think I saw somebody unmic, so I want to just leave room. And maybe when people think, I'm looking at this and obviously seeing a lot of red, like there's an issue across the board for all subgroups, right, in chronic absenteeism. But additionally, I mean, when you see this across the board for every single indicator for Black students in Oakland, I think that really just shows the intersection of all of these indicators. And so you can see how a lot of this likely is connected. There are root causes for why the district, or how the district may be filling Black students specifically. But we can also see that likely a lot of these things are connected when it's this red across the board. And then I did also just want to reiterate that now with this new LCAP and with these new required actions, Oakland is going to have to create a required action specifically for Black students for every single one of these indicators. And that's going to be shown as an action in your LCAP report. So you'll be able to go through there and see that, there are specific programs or maybe some more resources that are going to be allocated specifically to improve these numbers that we're seeing here. Let's just jump to the next slide. We're still going to be using Oakland. We're just going to be diving a little bit deeper now. So now we're going to be looking at a specific schools in red on the state indicator of suspension. So this is still in Oakland Unified. And we're seeing that each of these schools that are in the red must create a targeted action to address suspension school-wide. So we have 10 schools ranging from elementary to high school. All of that are going to have to be addressed in the LCAPs in terms of suspension. There's going to be required actions broken down by the school, and we're going to see this much more targeted approach. So the question that I have, if it comes up for anybody really, is what questions would you have for the district or school if you're in Oakland and you're seeing this, or if you're seeing something similar in your district where only, a portion of schools are really struggling with suspension rates. And we have some feedback in the chat. Sylvia, would you be able to help translate or interpret what's in the chat for us?
Yes, give me 1 second to look at our chat. Maria says, I think that the Department of Education should ask for more context around why the schools are in red and also for the districts themselves.
Yeah, that's really great feedback. It's to provide them with more context, right? This is showing just like a really cursory overview of what schools are showing, but I think it was Gilberto's point when it showed like, how does one district show up as green possibly, but then you start breaking it down and you see that different schools are really struggling based off of the disparities in that district. So this, I think, is one step to hopefully get us there, get us to the point where there can be more levels of accountability. But right now, being able to look at this, we're really hoping that through all of our advocacy, we can start having districts really start to break down and be detailed in solving these issues and really getting to the root cause of these issues as well. And then we have in the chat from Tom, the LCAP addresses actions for district dashboard indicators. For a school site dashboard indicator that is in the red, is there any requirement to address things in the school plan student achievement? So there is going to be an engagement requirement that's a part of this. And one of the suggestions that we would have really is that this should all be getting done in like one committee at a school site. I think that would just make it so it cuts down in terms of how many meetings folks are having to go to. But that really is a recommendation of how this should be happening, because they do need to be addressing it on a school site level and getting engagement from the parents and students at that school site. I hope I answered that correctly, Tom, but if not, feel free to unmic yourself and we can talk about it further. If not, I'm gonna have us maybe jump to the next slide. Again, we're still gonna be on Oakland. We're just, oh, sorry, yes.
I think Gilberto just unmuted. They might have a question.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, yes. I'm curious. These steps that are required to be done by the district, is this requirement in the ed code, or is this just a policy issuance by the state Department of Education? I hope the question is clear. And where I'm going with this, if a district is not doing this well, is there a site in the ed code that could be used to sue the district to force it to do well? Again, I hope I'm clear.
You are. Thank you, Gilberto. I'm going to see if Nicole can answer this question for you.
Sure, yeah. So the answer is yes, it's in the ed code. I believe this is like many things in the ed code, which directs the State Board of Education to adopt an LCAP template that includes things. I'm not 100% sure, so I could check back on that. But the short answer is yes, it's enforceable, but the way that we've enforced most of these types of requirements is through a UCP complaint with the first against the district, and then appeal it up to the California Department of Education. And it takes a lot to actually take that to court. So we are sort of like in the, I don't know, I guess I would say stuck in the administrative process. But yeah, but we have used that many times in the past to try to enforce some of these rules. And to be really honest with you, it creates some movement, but it doesn't get us all the way there. And I think it's really a lot of it's the legal pressure combined with like ongoing and sustained community organizing and pressure that is what's really necessary to make some of these like, rights real, I guess. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. I figured that, but I guess a follow-up would be, could we have our boards of education be a little bit more aggressive if the district that they have oversight of is not really effective in developing these plans?
Sorry, could you say that again? Could the district,
And, yeah, again, I look at a trustee and the Board of Education as part of his or her, their responsibility is to ensure the district is creating these viable plans as response to the fact that there are these red zones. And so my concern, and I forgive the pontification, but my concern is that most trustees do not have the competencies around oversight. So they will not be enforcing this and ensuring that the district does a better job of the plans that they develop. I know that's the case in my district. So I'm just looking for a way to ensure quality of the plan and execution of the plan, and where we can light the fire under whose feet. Thank you for hearing me out.
Yeah, that's a great point, Gilberto. For sure, like if you can get your board to pass a resolution or something like that can help, especially if you're, a resolution targeting certain student groups that are like in the red across the board, like we saw in one of those examples. But yeah, I think if you haven't already, trying, like I kind of made it sound bad, but trying the administrative complaint method is not a bad way to start either if you haven't tried that yet in your district. So feel free to just contact us if you want more information about that.
Thanks for answering that, Nicole. And thank you for your questions, Gilberto. I think also, we've gone through in West Contra Costa, we've gone through an analysis of the LCAP every year. And so this is something too, now that this will be a new, something new to monitor for us in the districts that we partner closely with folks like West Contra Costa. I'll be looking at the LCAP as well. So this is something that like in the beginning stages of our advocacy, starting to point out whether or not straight off, like right when this new requirement is getting offered, making sure that the district is actually following all their guidelines and then staying on top of them and finding a way to just have some checks and balances in place through the work that we're all doing together. Thank you for the question. Always appreciate them, Gilberto. I'm going to move us to our third example. That's going to go one more step deeper. So it was, we first did student groups and looked at which student groups were in red. And then that last slide was the schools that are in red. And now this example are going to be the student groups within a school that are red. There's a lot of text on the slide. So please, again, like if you're having difficulty reading it or looking at it, just flag that for me. I'm going to read off of this so you can see it. So what is up on this slide right now is from Westlake Middle School in Oakland Unified. And so Oakland now, based off of these numbers, must create targeted actions for Black students, specifically at Westlake Middle School, to address again across the board, chronic absenteeism, suspensions, English, and math proficiency. There's an NA here under graduation rate because this is a middle school. So that's when you're generally going to see NAs on that list for elementary and middle schools. And so again, just kind of asking the question, what needs are being shown here and what programs, services, or staff could you advocate for to meet those needs? And we highlighted this specifically for what we're looking at for African-American students, but almost everything that we're seeing here on this chart is in the red. So if anything is coming up for you in terms of what we're seeing, what you're seeing, you can feel free to unmic or write it in the chat. Thank you, Olga. Have a good night. And I can kind of get us off the board of like some things that might be coming up for you when looking at this, or some things to kind of get you started while looking at it. So when looking at this and seeing again, like across the board, all of these items are in red. Maybe, there is a specific program that could address possibly the root of all these issues, right? So what is it? If it's chronic absenteeism and suspension rates that are then making it so students, particularly Black students in this school, are experiencing issues with ELA and mathematics, then, you know, is there a certain program that can help address the chronic absenteeism and the suspension, specifically the suspensions, right? Like, is there any form of culturally responsive teacher trainings, maybe in restorative practices, that can help lower the rates of suspension? And then as a result, maybe that will increase the performance in ELA and math. They are going to have actions for each and every one of these, but that's maybe something that you can start looking for depending on the needs that you all see and what you choose to advocate for. That could be one section of really just showing how to address the root of this, but hopefully start to see improvements across the board. And again, the district will have to show in their LCAP how the required actions will address every single one of these indicators in the red at Westlake Middle School, and then how the action will be specifically targeted to address the needs of Black students who attend Westlake Middle. So this is, again, just breaking it down even further to the most like targeted, detailed approach. And I see in the chat from Rachel, oftentimes chronic absenteeism stems from housing insecurity, which signals the ways that this is tied into root causes and can often be difficult to address at the school level. Is there any way you want to come off mute at all, Rachel, and go further on that? Thank you for putting in the chat.
Well, I think it can be challenging because a lot of this data, I've been working in the education field for a long time, and a lot of this data isn't new, particularly around Black students in Oakland and other districts. And so as we've seen housing costs and other costs of living skyrocket and more housing insecurity and food insecurity, it's kind of like the school can do what it can, but it also needs to be more of a community-based network of approach and take more of a cross-sector approach to these issues that aren't limited to just how students are performing or showing up, and whether indeed they're showing up at all in the schools, but how they're resourced in a kind of more macro level within the community. So that's kind of what I wanted to draw attention to there with that comment. But the other thing I was going to say too about looking at, you asked what we might look at. One of the things to look at, I think, in some of these schools around literacy and ELA performance in general would be whether they have school libraries and whether those libraries are staffed, and then further whether they're staffed with credentialed teacher librarians, because there's clear data on the connection between well-resourced school libraries that are staffed and literacy rates in schools. So in Oakland has had kind of a checkered history of staffing its school libraries and opening its school libraries. So that would be a question I would ask.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Rachel. That's a huge one, especially when you're breaking it down on this school site level. So really seeing like if possibly some of these indicators are showing up in green when it comes to like ELA and literacy at some school sites, and it's not showing up and it's in the red and other ones, really starting to get at those questions of, is it something that is as direct of a resource as like access to these books and libraries? And definitely hear you on the terms of when it comes to chronic absenteeism. Here on the indicators, you know, they show at least for socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and again, all in the red, but there's no data right here at this school for homeless or for foster youth as well. So definitely this is something that like the district will be able to, is needed to address, but then hopefully receiving feedback and engagement, but from folks specifically at the school site level. And I see it was Maria's question in the chat about NA. So because we're looking at a middle school here, the graduation rate is going to be at NA because those numbers are specifically for like high school graduation. And then like Tom added, sometimes the NA just stands for they just didn't collect the data, or if you can notice like on the English learner progress, it shows as NA across the board, except specifically for English learners, because that's an indicator that will only show up for English learners. And I think we need to move forward. If that's all right with folks, we're going to hop over to The second new requirement that is coming along this year, which is going to be required actions for long-term English learner students. So LTELs are not a student subgroup shown in the California dashboard. It shows for English learners, but LTELs are considered a separate category. Although they're not showing up on the California dashboard, when a student is classified as an LTEL, generally that means that the district is failing to improve that student's outcomes because they can't be reclassified, and then they no longer, can be considered a long-term English learner. So although there's not on the actual California dashboard, there's now going to be required actions for LTELs to make sure that the district is paying attention to really improving the outcomes, so then the reclassification can happen for these students. So starting in 2024 to 2025, all school districts with 15 or more long-term English learners are going to be required to include specific LTEL actions in their LCAP. So those action items are going to have to address language acquisition programs for students, so like developmental programs, and then they're also going to have to address professional development for teachers. So again, originally, districts were only required by law to develop improvement efforts for the district as a whole, but now this is another example of like a much more narrow approach specifically for long-term English learners. And next slide, please. So why does this all matter? Oh, Maria, can you please give an example in PD for teachers? So I would say for one example, like there's culturally responsive professional development, but especially when it comes to long-term English learners, just really making sure that the teachers have all of the training to be teaching English learners and all the certifications that are needed as well. And Nicole is going to give probably a better example than I can.
Oh no, it's just, I think one area where there's a lot of professional development needed is for what's called like dually identified English learners, who are both English learners, identified as English learners, and also identified as students with special needs who have IEPs. And it's like pretty, I think, challenging sometimes to understand, like, okay, like struggles with reading, is that due to like language issues, or is that due to like reading disability issues? And so, for example, professional development to teachers to help them understand that, differentiate, and be able to support students based on whatever their needs are.
Thank you, Nicole. And then rounding us out for these new required actions and why they really matter. LCAP and required actions are going to require all districts to work with community members to figure out how to address these equity gaps to support students in the district that they are just not serving well. It's not going to be limited to low-income students, foster youth, and English learners, which is what the LCAP always has generally been focused on. Now it's a way that we can start to really address multiple subgroups that are not already provided in through LCFF and meet their unmet needs. And then this also makes it explicit, makes it so the district has to make explicit commitments in writing to implement their solutions. So now we're going to have to show in the LCAP what they're planning on doing about improving these, and then there's going to be a level of effectiveness as well. So these new requirements, both the required actions generally, and then the required actions for LTELs, are going to be providing another form of transparency and accountability that you all, hopefully like from this training and from other practice of going through the data, you'll be able to present that data to the district in your advocacy. Next slide. And just a reminder, because I don't know if we actually even went over this yet. So the required actions do not come with additional funding. So the district must use funding to close the gaps. There are some ways that, we can try to, but as of right now, this is kind of like a transparency tool. But next slide, please. So some of you might be thinking or laughing like Gilberto. Then what are we going to do? Like, how is this actually going to show improvements? And how can we actually fund these required actions then? There are some ways that you can get around it and find out how to, and it does require, you know, some legwork from us, not only the district, in case they just look and say, well, we don't have the money for this. So one is finding a new funding stream. So an example are community school grants. A lot of the schools that might be targeted and be showing up in the red might be considered community schools. So folks who are on those committees or are doing school site advocacy can say, I know that we're getting X amount of funding from community school grants. Let's allocate that towards improving these indicators that are showing up at our school. And then another way is to identify a way to repurpose existing resources. So maybe this is creating a new requirement to assess the effectiveness of the LCAP actions and then change ineffective ones. So an example of that would look like in the past, districts have reinvested the funding that was originally used for police or officers and instead created a new action to invest in and fund counselors. So the money is like already there and it's showing that it's ineffective. And then being able to show up during these LCAP engagement meetings or however your district holds and engages folks on the LCAP and ask for them to start reinvesting in new ways that will benefit students and increase these outcomes. So there is a new effectiveness requirement in the LCAP as well. So this is something that's new, that the districts must now describe the effectiveness and the ineffectiveness of actions towards meeting the goal. And they're going to have to change the actions that they haven't proven effective over 3 years. So this is really where you could advocate to repurpose the existing resources into a new requirement that is more effective. It might be just putting a little bit more pressure on the district of showing you have this requirement, that what you are doing and how you are addressing these inequities, they have to be effective and they haven't been after 3 years. So it kind of, again, just puts a little bit more pressure and then you have this data at your fingertips to really be able to show it to them and let them know that you all are following along. And we have Sylvia, if you can help translate in the chat. And then Gilberto, do you want to come off mic for a second with this one?
Yeah, there is a federal act called the Community Reinvestment Act that banks have to comply with, especially in low and moderate income census tracts. It's an old anti-redlining law. And what I'm getting at is they can be a resource for those schools, you know, getting some additional funding, getting some people to come into classrooms and help teach. So that's an idea that I haven't tested it out, but I'm thinking that's another resource, especially if you know your school is in an LMI census tract.
Yeah, that's huge. And I'm really excited to see if we can try that out this cycle while we're seeing the district really start to lay out their plan here with the required actions. And then I had Jessica, I saw your hand was raised. Did you still have a comment or question here?
No, solo era ahorita la diapositiva anterior donde dices que
No, just going back to the old PowerPoint slide, when we were talking about preparation for teachers or bringing more teachers, I really like what I'm hearing. We really do need to invest in having educators that are well prepared, because many of our students are stuck as English learners for such a long time, and maybe they didn't have a proper assessment and they didn't know that he possibly has dyslexia. And because our teachers are not prepared for that, unfortunately, it is our youth who are facing this. I'm so thankful for this information. And another thing is, yes, these districts present these surveys around LCAP and data, but are these recommendations really taken into implementation as we are offering them? I really like everything and what I'm hearing, and I would really love to put this into practice in my own district. I know that maybe in my district it can be difficult when we have only one parent pushing for something, but I am so grateful to be here, and thank you for the opportunity for sharing.
Of course, thank you so much for sharing. And again, offering this up after this training, we are going to post a survey where you can sign up for a one-on-one too. And so if you really want to just keep the momentum going and see how you can really start using the dashboard as a tool for this upcoming LCAP cycle, definitely sign up and we can get a meeting. And then, so thank you, Sylvia. We have from Maria, parents may not be able to advocate as they would like at LCAP meetings, since they only have a few minutes to give their opinion on each goal. That's totally true. I think a lot of the times there are so many issues that we like to focus on because there's so many inequities. And so what I like about this new dashboard tool is that it is so focused. And so that can really help, you know, maybe for this 1 year or maybe for these 2 years, really pointing out like what is 1 or 2 things that I want to prioritize in my advocacy, and use this, like use the data and use the new these new required actions to focus on that. And even if it's just the tiniest, you know, 1 minute or 2 minutes, however you get given, if you can really take a strong targeted approach in your advocacy, it'll make it easier throughout the year for you to track and monitor whether the district is actually following through on its promises.
Can I just add something to that?
Yeah.
I think it's totally true, and I agree with everything that Carissa said, that there can be like very small amounts of time, especially if you're limiting the time that you're allowed to speak on it to those LCAP public hearings. But that's also, I think, an opportunity for you as a community member to say to the district, you're not giving us enough time, like you're not giving us enough engagement time, right? So there needs to be more meetings outside of just this one public hearing for us to really talk to you about our concerns. Yeah. But I think Nicole just said something similar in the chat.
And then the next slide, really, we're seeing a lot of reflection happening and a lot of questions. So I think maybe just hopping to the questions and see if we can be addressing. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat here as well.
I think I saw Avelia raise her hand. I don't know if you wanted to ask a question, Avelia.
I did not want to ask a question. I was agreeing with what Maria said, and then reinforcing what the other speaker, and I didn't notice who was talking. But yes, I was at the meeting at the district last week, and parents were giving like a prompt, right, on the needs, and they were also giving a list of things that they should put as prioritize for the LCAP. But it was a very short and quick time that it was very difficult to even have a discussion among the parents. So yes, definitely agree with advocating at the board meeting that parents are not getting enough time. Definitely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And then also responding to Dwayne's comment in the chat, there a lot of times, you know, we'll see the districts will describe a program and saying we're using these funds for English learners, and it probably isn't actually, or maybe it is, but it might not be the most targeted use of those funds. And so I'm really hoping that this new effectiveness part of this requirement can help. It'll take 3 years, but hopefully that'll show after those 3 years that they actually have to show what the effectiveness is of those programs. Are there any other questions while we're wrapping up? Gilberto, go ahead.
Yes, I have one. Again, going back to accountability. What if a district says we're going to do this intermediate or this program, that program doesn't work, and then the next year they come up with something else and that program doesn't work? Is there some sort of independent of the LEA that says, okay, you folks, you need to crack down now. You really need to do this. You've had like a number of years where you've used programs. So who has the ultimate ability to say, this is not enough and you need to do better? This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay, I could start taking this one. So the County Office of Education is the one that sort of oversees the districts. and they're responsible for making sure the LCAP and the budget comply with legal requirements, for example, including this one, right? And they're also tasked with like the support part of it. So county offices of education are also supposed to support districts close those equity gaps for student groups and schools who are in the red. Now, whether they actually have the capacity to do that is another question. We have filed complaints against county offices of education for failing to fulfill their accountability and oversight duties. And we have found that a lot of things fall through the cracks, and that they don't really have the capacity and the staffing that they need to do, you know, right by all of the students and by their role. So I guess that's a long way of saying county offices of education, but there are limits to what they can do. And in terms of what to do to solve that, I think it does go back to the state and trying to get them to be better funded and to have better teeth. Because another thing that the county offices say is that, you know, we cannot enforce anything that's not like clearly within our jurisdiction. So giving county offices more authority to, as you say, you know, crack down or hold stronger accountability over districts who aren't kind of doing what they need to for students.
And then Nicole, I'm gonna also, we'll do one last comment from Maria and then start to close out. So Maria included that something that they had learned is that participating in LCAP is that no one in the district is in charge of evaluating the LCAP and asking for updated goals. I hear you. It is a super long report, and I think the district a lot of districts at times, you know, can use that as an excuse to not really going through. And that's where, you know, we have these district-wide committees that really can hopefully or supposed to serve as that accountability measure of being able to track the goals. But that's also really where it comes into unfortunately, like on parents and on community organizers and members to just focus in on like a specific goal or something in that year to monitor and keep bringing back to the district and asking them, what are you doing? What funds? I saw that you allocated X amount of funds to this program. It's been 3 months. What has actually happened with that program? And really just trying to pinpoint what you want to put your energy into and see if you can start holding them accountable that way. And then Nicole, I'm going to pass it over to you to close us out.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for your great questions and engagement. I'm sorry we don't have all the, you know, I mean, I guess no one has all the answers, but I feel like this feeling of like, oh, I wish I had better answers for these accountability questions. But I guess that means that we all need to work together to advocate for better accountability. But in any case, as we've been saying, please sign up in the feedback form for a one-to-one session if you want to go into any of these issues in a deeper way, you know, specific to your district. And then 2 weeks from today, we'll be having the learning session that's focused just on the equity multiplier, which is actually a new stream of funding. We just said that the required actions don't come with any additional funding, but the equity multiplier does. That's a funding stream to school sites. So join us in 2 weeks if you want to learn more about that. And I think that's it. Please fill out the feedback survey. Here's an email sign up also. And yeah, thanks again for joining us this evening, and hope to see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Gracias
Thank
por
you,
la
Nicole.
invitación.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.